Here we go. Let's get started. I hope the mic doesn't die on me today. I haven't charged it in a while, so we'll see. But let's get started. Beyond the party label, who are we really voting for? What if the biggest problem with our elections isn't simply who is Republican or Democrat, but how easily those labels can convince us to stop looking any further? Because today I received a piece of political mail that was supposed to convince me to vote for a certain candidate. And instead, it sent me down an entire rabbit hole. It made me start asking, are we actually choosing the people who represent us, or are we being persuaded to choose a political team? And that brings me back to something John Coleman wrote. Both the left and the right of the political spectrum is controlled by the same people, which I think we're all starting to realize. Now, whether you agree with Coleman or not, I think the question is worth asking. Because when I started looking at the candidates we have in front of us in Colorado, I realized something. This election isn't as simple as Republican versus Democrat. We're talking about campaign money, lobbying, party rhetoric, abortion, Israel, the military, candidates making endless unfulfilled promises and then attacking the other side for being the problem. And somewhere in all of that noise, the most important question gets lost. Who are these people actually going to represent once we give them our vote? So today, I'm not asking you to blindly vote Republican. I'm not asking you to blindly vote Democrat. I'm not even asking, well, I am asking you to vote, but I'm asking you to put the labels aside and look past the campaign mail and actually examine the person you're voting for. Because sometimes the candidate who says exactly what you want to hear isn't necessarily the candidate you should stop asking questions to. And sometimes the candidate you disagree with on one major issue may still force you to ask whether there are other issues that matter just as much or even more. So let's look at the candidates and look at what they're saying, where the money is coming from, and most importantly, let's stop voting for a label and start looking at the person behind it. Instead of unnecessary cheering, we should be asking necessary questions. The theme of today's episode was brought forth by a piece of promotional mail that I got this morning, and then it sent me on a whole rabbit hole, as I stated. And today's selection of elected officials we have to choose from, I would say, is not a very good pool at all. As I stated at the top, the quote by John Coleman, I'll repeat again, that most of us know both the left and the right of the political spectrum is controlled by the same people. Now, why is that relevant? Well, let's get into that piece of promotional political mail that I got from Jeff Crank. And now I did read the whole page, and I just have to say there were a few things that stood out to me, which seems to be this Republican grift that's happening, and it seems very manipulative. One example is where he says, but my opponents are working overtime to see I am defeated at the polls. They will stop at nothing to try and buy this seat that is home to 5 military installations. Now, I'll stop right there and I'll explain why this stood out to me. Because he is saying that the opponents are trying to buy the seat while he is in a seat currently being bought by AIPAC, also known as the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Now, if that's not hypocrisy, I don't know what is. Or projection, really, what you could say. It's like when the domestic violence man tries to be like, no, you're the crazy one, while they're being crazy, or whatever. I digress. It doesn't matter. And if you believe me here, or sorry, if you don't believe me here, this right here will show the stated value of funding on the APAC tracker website. And now, as you see it, 12,000 might not seem like that much, but clearly that can just be the beginning, considering if we take a look at the top two, which is Michael Bennett and John Hickenlooper, still don't know how to pronounce his name, also a Colorado senator, they have taken large amounts of APAC money. And this is just a maybe. But maybe Jeff Crank is banking on or even hoping for an opportunity to become like these senators making over 600,000 from a lobbyist group. Now, I would say it is not wise for an elected official to be taking and accepting money from a lobbyist group from a country that many people in America are having a rising disapproval level of. And what that country is Israel, of course. And when I say Israel, I am talking about the administration of Israel, not all of their citizens. Because just like America, we are not all in agreement for what our current administration is doing, but it doesn't mean that all Americans are bad or that all Americans are in support of what our administration is doing. So I want to make that clear distinction. Now, the next point in this letter that caught my attention on this promotional piece of mail from Jeff Crank, he says the Democrats have made it clear they are prepared to do anything to win in 2026. And I find this ironic considering actually it seems that the Republicans are bringing forward anything to win in 2026, like a candidate such as Victor Marx. And I will go a little more in depth about Victor Marx later in this episode, but right now I want to discuss the opponent for Jeff Crank. Her name is Jessica Killin, and just like she supports killing these babies, okay, now that's a cruel joke. And the reason I say it is because she is in support of reproductive freedoms, which to me is just a nice way of saying that you are pro choice and trying to use blanket words to make it seem not so bad, just like when they say it's healthcare, but really it's killing a baby. And yes, the argument could just continue to go in circles, but because the theme of today's episode is not to argue about abortion views, even though mine is pro life, it is to bring attention to other evils that are at hand as well, and to put it to one's mind to weigh the pros and cons when there are multiple evils at hand, like with both of these candidates. As I said, I'm discussing the pros and cons of the two people trying to apply for the position of the 5th congressional seat, which is Jeff Crank and Jessica Killin. However, I will say when Jessica was doing a speech, she just seemed to be saying a whole lot of nothing. You can go and watch it for yourself, and the constituents seem to cheer for hardly anything at all, but I still wonder who is the better candidate. I did see her in another video when she was opposing Joe Reagan, and she was seeming to do a good job there, I will say. She actually was making valid points, and I'm not 100% opposed because I want to look at the person overall, not just the fact that, oh, are they pro life or pro choice? Just like a president could be pro choice, but then he meets 8 out of the 10 categories that you're looking for when it comes to conservatism or whatever else your values are. Because again, I'm not trying to do this name dividing or play into that. But just like I'm not for abortion and Jessica is, maybe she's the better candidate in this circumstance, even if she's not pro life, only because the destruction that could be brought forth by Jeff Crank may be even more serious. Infiltration is a deceptive tactic, and that seems to be the case because while he is claiming Sorry. So while he is claiming they will stop at nothing to try and buy the seat that is home to 5 military installations, he is currently being bought out, and that proves he would not be making decisions based on the interest of the people, but based on the interest of the group lobbying him, known as APAC. Also, if you've been paying attention, there are many far right Republicans blaming everything on the leftists, and Jeff Crank does exactly this same thing. He says, quote, but make no mistake, we are under attack from the hard left elitists who want to California our Colorado. Now, to me, this is one of those points I feel like the people of the constituents of Colorado would just be cheering, like what they would do for Jessica when he says a statement like this. However, I believe that this is a manipulation tactic brought forth by the Republican Party to make people vote Republican instead of Democrat. And again, I don't have a political allegiance or tribalism to a certain party. I know that I have values that I care about, and I have certain beliefs that I believe would make the country better if we went back to actually upholding the Constitution and supporting our rights and making those our founding principles to any policy we create, but that has not been the case. And again, it's this left and right war. So I'm adding that because the reason I believe this is a manipulation tactic brought forth by the Republican Party is that instead of simply blaming everything on the Democrats, that is kind of what Jeff Crank is doing here. That seems to be the tactic, is to point the finger when there could be many other ways that they could try to improve, like focusing on actually upholding the Constitution and basing their values on that, or even their policies on that. And it's kind of interesting because just this is the same thing that when they say the leftists or the lefties or the left did this or they did that, it is the same with this Jeff Crank situation, even just this little flyer. It is the same with the Charlie Kirk assassination. Everything is on the left somehow, while the same talking points are coming from the extreme pro Israel speakers the majority of the time. And I urge you to once again remember that Jeff Crank is receiving money from a pro Israeli APAC lobby. And now, when it comes to choosing between these two, it might seem at face value like choosing the pro life person is the point that I'm trying to make, but I'm not. I actually believe that being aware of the person attempting to infiltrate and manipulate is much more deceptive than a person who at least is out in the open and claiming that they are for something that maybe you're not. But at least they are not receiving money from APAC. And when I say they in this example, it would be Jessica. And I say that because as I've been bringing attention to the bill S4784, the National Defense Association Act bill, I believe is what it's called, there's an attempt to conjoin the US military and the Israeli military. And that's quite dangerous considering the results we have seen with the way they try to destroy the peace deals with Iran and the way that they totally obliterated Gaza. And regardless if you believe it was provoked or not, that is still not a reasonable level of retaliation to any group of people with what happened in Gaza. And I would like to show you this picture as a little tangent just because it's very thought provoking. Now, as I stated, this piece of mail took me on a whole tangent that I did not expect to go on today, and this led me to start looking into the Democratic governor candidate that is going to be on the ballot for November 3rd, and that is Phil Weiser. And truly, I am not a fan. I still have much to learn about this man, but he is for what seems like excessive levels of mental health care for children, which we've seen how the mental health care for children is actually turning children trans. And this reminds me, or I should say, supporting children going trans, or maybe even affirming them. And this reminds me of a time I saw a bumper sticker saying, protect trans kids. No, how about we protect kids from transgenderism instead of trying to promote them to go trans in the first place? These statements about mental health care just seem like a new way of saying we're going to indoctrinate your child into believing this thing. And if they come into our office, we're going to affirm them. And that is how it seems to me, anyway. And when I hear people advocating for mental health for kids, again, that's just what comes to mind. And if you're curious how I'm basing my opinion, it is off of his official governor candidate website itself, considering he is also for abortion. I'm not a fan of that. As I've already stated, I am not for abortion. Attack me what you will, but you can clearly tell that I mean it. I don't mean it in any malice way. And I actually care about people overall. And that is why I care about abortion. And I'm not for it. But I digress. You can check the website out for yourself for Phil Weisner and his other beliefs, and it is quite thorough. However, I mentioned at the top of this episode that I would discuss more about Victor Marx, and I will do that here now. I'm sure many of us have seen the debates that Victor Marx has done, and they have honestly been quite embarrassing, and I am shocked that he has the courage to go out and be this way on live television. But I mean, I guess that it's just proving his true colors. And really, he just seems like a joke. The other Republican candidates were not a fan of him. The majority of people in comments on videos that he has done, like on the 9 News YouTube channel by Kyle Clark, people state how much of an embarrassment Victor is. And this is a little tangent. I just think that Kyle Clark actually does a great job. Honestly, I respect how blunt he is and the evidence he uses to actually back up his argument as a Democratic per commentator. I just think it's nice to see that, kind of like Glenn Greenwald is the same thing. Again, I'm looking at the overall substance of the person, the way they speak, or the evidence that they use, instead of just are they this title or that title, because it doesn't matter. But what does matter is the values, the skills, abilities, and other characteristics that I'm looking for when I'm looking for a candidate, and based on like your current values. And I do think when I'm looking for someone, I am seeking a person who aligns with Christian values for the most part. But we live in a secular world. Most people are not actually Christian. And so that's why it is best to look at overall what are these candidates saying or promoting, because even if they're disagreeing in one category, they should not be automatically opposed simply because they are not checking that one box for you. But in my opinion, Victor Marx does not meet this criteria for me at all, because even though he claims to be a minister, he has been caught in deliberate lies throughout his interviews with people such as Kyle Clark, and then statements made on the Sean Ryan show. When questioned about it, he deflected or would gaslight or just simply lie. And also on his online debates, you can just see the, I don't even know, like debacle, or I don't know what the word is for that, but it's just foolishness. And what I actually find ironic is the fact that there is a debate coming up on August 27th at 6 p.m. at the Penrose House in Colorado Springs between elected officials who will be on the ballot for November 3rd, 2026. But what was striking is that the article reads, Republican nominee Victor Marx declined an invitation to participate in the debate. I wonder why. Maybe it's because he did so freaking bad. And I wonder if this is their way of trying to protect the small amount of support he currently does have, because of how bad he has done in public with his speaking so far. And I'll say, when he was running, it seemed like he was doing a good job, but really it was just him talking about unrelated and unnecessary stories while running for governor at many of his rallies. I remember watching a full video of his rally, and he said a whole lot of nothing. Again, the constituents need to be wiser themselves as well, and they're over there cheering for absolutely nothing. Instead, it's like, what are you actually going to do for Colorado? What are your actual morals? And like, he will mention the Lord one time, and it's like, that is not enough considering you're about to run a whole state and city. Like, no. And that brings me to the 2 points of hope I do see, though. And through all of this, there is the two slivers of hope are Greg Lopez, which is an unaffiliated governor that will be on the ballot, and he has given me some hope because, according to his official website, he seems to have more conservative leaning values, at least in my opinion. He is strongly opposed to abortion. He is for small businesses. He is for legal immigration, not illegal immigration. He is opposed to data centers and is willing to take a pause to consider the facts on the data centers, which I think is a plus. And he is wanting more power to be to the parents, which also I agree with. And again, it does seem more conservative leaning based on the other candidates that we have to choose from, such as Phil Weiser and Victor Marx. However, I still don't want to count out Barbara Kirkmeyer. She truly seems like the most reasonable and qualified candidate that Colorado could get for governor. And it was clearly a close call where she could have been on the ballot. And if there is a write-in ballot option, maybe I'll just put her on there. But I am keeping an open mind considering that debate is coming up that I just mentioned. And I think it's important to see what people have to say. And who knows, maybe she'll be there, or maybe she is going to try to get a movement going for people to write in her name on the ballot. Um, However, like I said, these two candidates give me a sliver of hope, and I am going to hold on to that hope because we are in a state of affairs where tensions are rising. People are definitely unhappy with the current state of affairs of not only Colorado, but our country overall, and what our administration is deciding to do without considering the public's opinion before making decisions. So I think it's important to vote and to be informed when you vote, because the two worst things you can do is to not vote at all, because that guarantees that your vote won't count at all, but also to be uninformed and unaware when voting. I believe, like I said, those are the two worst things that you can do, because now you may be voting for someone who has horrible morals and maybe doesn't even agree with the majority of the beliefs you have. So let's throw political tribalism out of the window and actually look at the merit, values, morals, and wisdom of the people trying to be our representatives. If and when we look at the morals and the values, maybe we can actually start electing people that could make our cities and our countries better, instead of just getting behind and bandwagoning because you see this person has the most signs when it comes to us being at a city council hearing or at a precinct caucus, whatever it may be. And with that, I hope you all consider what was said today. Stay up to date on the upcoming debate, because that displays one's character, and pray over Jeremiah 29:7. And with that, I thank you for joining the Henshow Network, and I hope you all have a great weekend. Bye, guys.